Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our lecture series for the College of Architecture and Design. And before we begin with the lecture and the official introduction, just a couple of announcements. One is that this session has been approved for AIA, American Institute of Architects, continuing education credit. So for those of you that are licensed architects with the AIA, or, no, it's actually only licensed architects because I don't think this is a health, safety, welfare lecture. So, oh no. So the sign-up sheet is just right outside in the hall, thanks to Sally Oak. Thank you, Sally. And next, I want to make sure that everyone is aware and is invited to 7 o'clock on Tuesday, the Presidential Symposium. It's something that happens during homecoming week, and this is going to be an interesting symposium. It's titled Reclaiming Detroit with Design and Technology. And it has, it's being moderated by Frank Beckman, radio personality and a talk show host. Panelists will include Robert Gregory, who's a senior vice president with the Downtown Detroit Partnership, Rainey Hamilton Jr., who's president of Hamilton Anderson Associates, a very well-known architectural firm, W. Kim Herron, who's with the Kresge Foundation, and Faye Nelson, who's the president and CEO of the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy. And they will get into a very spirited discussion, I'm certain. Whoops, and I just turned off the...
It's okay.
You know how to get out of this? Okay. They will have a very spirited discussion about the future of Detroit. And we want all of you to attend this lecture if possible. So with that said, I would like to begin tonight's formal program with an introduction of Professor James Stevens, who will introduce our speaker. Jim?
Thanks, Glenn. Before I start, I'm going to make a shameless plug for an exhibit opening tomorrow night at 6 at Studio Couture in downtown Detroit. And it's titled Albania Now, and many of the projects and works that you'll be seeing tonight will be exhibited along with a handful of other projects that we discovered in our travels in the country that I think a lot of you will find quite interesting. So please, if you have time, come down and check it out and kind of celebrate that work with us. A little bit of background before we start and how this all came about. In 2011, in the Make Lab, we started to realize we wanted to have an opportunity to disseminate our knowledge through workshops and lectures outside of the university and preferably outside of the country. And acting on a suggestion from one of my students, Pandish Galci, who many of you know, I contacted Polish University in Tirana, Albania. And after many emails and discussions, I found myself on a plane on the way to Albania. And I have to be honest, when I left, I had absolutely no idea what to expect. I had taught abroad before, but I had never been to the Balkans. I had never been to Albania, and I certainly hadn't taught in those places. And like Detroit, unfortunately, Albania shares many economic challenges and also many unfounded judgments from the outside world that are generally based on not on fact, but on what they've been told or hearsay. But what I found was an impressive school of architecture and planning. And I was consistently impressed with the school, its staff, and students, and of course the leadership provided by our guests tonight. I've returned 3 times to Polis, with each trip revealing vast improvement in faculty, curriculum, and facilities. And Polis has become a home away from home for me, and I feel an attachment and responsibility to the institution. And I think I feel this way because I know, after visiting several times, how incredibly challenging it is to build a university in this place and in this time, and how imperative it is to do so. As Albania and its neighboring countries convert their built environments from the post-communist landscape to emerging capitalism, Polis is leading the way and training the architects and planners that will shape the region. And what a huge responsibility that is. And as President Modgil said just an hour ago, in many ways, what our guest tonight's doing is nation building as much as he is educating architects. So with that, I'm going to give you a very abridged version of our guest. The rector, Besnik, Aliaj, graduated with a degree in architecture and urban design in 1990, followed by his postgraduate studies in real estate and property evaluation at the Polytechnic University of Tirana. He also received his master in urban management in 1996 at the Urban Management Center at Erasmus University.
Erasmus.
Yeah, there we go. In the Rotterdam, the Netherlands. He received his Doctorate of Science in Urban Planning in 2005 from the Polytechnic University of Tirana. And he has held academic teaching and research appointments at the IPC College in Denmark in 1994, the University of Oslo in 1995, the University of Florence in 1998, and has participated in the IVP program on urban and environmental issues here at the State Department in the United States. Besnik is the co-founder and current rector of Polis University, and he's also the co-founder and executive director of CoPlan, an institute for habitat development, and the co-owner of the architecture and design studio Metropolis Limited. He's the author of several publications and scientific articles and local forums, including the Albanian periodical on architecture and urban planning titled Forum AP. And with that, I give you Dr. Besnik.
Thank you. It works, huh? Thank you for the humble introduction. I want to thank Glenn and James for making possible my visit here, and also Albanian students that created this sensibility about Polis and about our work there. I'll try to make it fast because it's a quite intensive story, and it has to do with Albania that entered in the turbulent period of drastic changes after the 1990. So it has to do with the collapse of communism in East Europe. But keep in mind that Albania at the time was like the Northern Korea of Europe. So it was very isolated. Private property was denied. The government was practically deciding for everything. Religion was forbidden. So it went to a certain extreme that people thought that it would take time to repair it. And it is like this, but in fact, people are moving really fast, faster than you can think, you can imagine. So actually, Albania is one of the most aggressive economies in the region, in Europe. Despite the problems that with recession worldwide, Albania relatively is doing quite okay because of this young population, energetic people, and strong entrepreneurial initiative. In this presentation, I'm going to focus basically in 4 parts. Telling a little bit about Albania from urban and architecture point of view, introducing the experience of CoPlan, Institute for Habitat Development, a non-governmental initiative that was created at the beginning of the 90s by a group of people, including me, with a lot of idealism and positivity to change the country, to contribute for the country. And it's basically focused on the first stages of urbanization in a moment that Albania was really having serious troubles. It's not the same Albania now, but nevertheless, this experience was very important for us. Later, I'll move, on basis of this experience, we establish Polis University as an alternative education institution on architecture and city sciences. And I'll try to conclude with some practice from our studio in terms of architecture, urban design, and planning, hopefully to meet your expectation. I choose this picture and the title because I want to show that from one side the nonsense existing there, but also the energy and the fact that people and business are moving faster than the government. Government is lagging behind. You see there is no coordination, so there is a kind of clear vacuum after the change in a society that was totally meant to be planned and organized by authorities. Suddenly authorities collapse and people take enhance their future. So energy, because in this society with a lot of problems inherited from communism, suddenly you see the future entrepreneurs coming up and developing. Everybody becomes a kind of entrepreneur in this country. So basically, I'm talking about experience of these three institutions: Polish University, Koplan, which is in fact the origin of our university, and Metropolis, which is part now of the Research Institute of Polish University. This is the image of Albania. A few months ago, Albania celebrated 100 years of independence from Ottoman Empire in 1912. When the Ottoman Empire was dismissed, Albania and many other in Balkan countries, many other countries won somehow this freedom. A moment that somehow was repeated in 1990, after the collapse of communist empire. You see, of course, there were a lot of celebrations. And you see that the city is quite interesting in terms of having the heritage, Christian and Muslim, living together in harmony. It's quite interesting case, this, for Albania and Balkans. And you see the vision of the former King Zog to develop a new capital city, European city, after the independence from Ottoman Empire. But you see the signs also of the communist regime, Opera House and others. And then a lot of energy coming up. Before, this were not possible. In Albania, during communism, you could not build more than 5 to 6 stores. That was frozen, and for technical reasons. This was King Zog, our monarch that established the first state after the independence. There is a lot of discussion about legitimacy for this guy, but he was a visionary. He decided to marry American and Hungarian princess. And in addition to that, he tried to make a statement that we are a different country that we were before. We are a European state. And in addition to that, he decided also to make a lot of interventions in the country, including planning the territory and the 15 main cities of the country. You see that tradition that we have in Albania. We had quite interesting tradition. It's a very ancient nation with a great special history. In south, if you go, you see more Mediterranean type of settlements. In north is similar but more scattered and more individualistic in landscape, very beautiful. Then in central Albania, you see the more influence of Ottoman architecture. Then King Zog comes with his vision establishing the new boulevard that at that time was like an airport field. Someone that came, French architect came and wrote a book, said that I saw a boulevard but not a city there. Because there was almost nothing there. The Tirana was here somehow, very organic, traditional. Interesting was that the king decides not to touch the city, but to develop new Tirana. And now this area is really densified, quite interesting. It's like downtown and is where the life of people happen also. And it happened because of King Zog. I want just to underline that this is the first layer of formation of our urban society. At that moment, Albania had only 20% of population living in urban centers. The rest was in rural areas. So what was the tool? Architecture and urban design was used as an instrument to inspire society, to solve the social problems. Architect was a kind of Spider-Man, you know, that could solve all the problems of society by nice design, and was a very inspiring moment. In fact, King Zog called Italian architects, Austrian architects. He developed even a master plan and this vision of the new squares. Of course, later, Italy, with a certain agenda of Mussolini, had certain agenda and tried to succeed to push him away, occupying Albania and making part of Italian empire. So in Tirana, you see that the projects start to become reality by developing complexes similar like in Rome, the Euro complex, and applying the same ideological principles that were implemented also during fascism in Italy. Well, by the end of Second World War, we have this guy that comes as a triumphator in Tirana. This is the communist leader Enver Hoxha, the guy that isolated the country for 4 or 5 decades. Practically, the country became a national prison. People could not travel abroad. They were not allowed to have passports. They could not believe in God. This was forbidden. Private property was gradually denied. And in the 80s, people could suffer even for food. Luckily, he died, so people got more courage. And with what happened also in Eastern Europe, in other countries, from Berlin Wall fall up to Bucharest happening, also Albania was the last country that decided to change. Hoxha became also famous because in the 60s he decided, initially he started a love story with Yugoslavia and Tito. He break relation, and then with Russians, with Stalin. Again, he break relation in the 60s. And then in 80s, in 70s, he did the same with Chinese. But through this system, he could generate a lot of financial support to sustain the poor economy and to maintain his power. So he was very smart in doing politics of his own. But of course, society would suffer. We have to accept that during this period, a lot of public works happened because they explored, the regime explored a lot the unpaid labor of people, and a lot of things happened in the city. You know, this kind of centralized type of planning, and in Tirana, this is the main boulevard that I explained to you, built during the time of King Zog and the Italians. It is empty. If you see it now, it's full of cars, and people, you can't believe that it was like this. It's like a ghost town. And this is because public space was not a place together. It was dangerous. It was not a place for joy or celebration or protest. So people escaped, and they decided to create their life in a private house or individually. Up to the moment, of course, when the people got in the street and started to protest. But this is also a kind of second layer of foundation of our cities, if we talk about this. In this period, the urbanization level reached to 35%. That was maximum. Authorities initially allowed and stimulated certain kind of industrialization and urbanization, but then they froze it because they didn't have the means to sustain it with housing, labor, and other services. This is the type of plan that was used during communism, blueprint plan, you know this. Very strict monofunctional zoning, and quite different from what we have now in Tirana. And in fact, now people have changed totally this kind of system, because before it was really, implemented in this way. Of course, the architecture in city center was more iconic, but in periphery was more simple. And this is the main boulevard at the time, a lot of green and main public buildings. That is more peripheral, but still you see a kind of modernist approach implemented in terms of urban development. As I said, buildings not more than 5 to 6 floors. That was the city center of Tirana. It's like you paint it, but in fact there are not people. There were few people, pedestrian, people who were working or avoiding the public space. No public means of private transport. This was not allowed. That's why you see a kind of environmental paradise, but not in terms of human rights. At the end of the period, of course, and I've been in this square where this happened, and I'm very emotional every time that I see this. We are the generation of troubles there, of changing. Our parents somehow were forced to survive, but we were the generation that we said, well, come on, we have to say the truth. It happened with a lot of enthusiasm and energy, and this is a kind of image that you see everywhere where there is a dictatorship, and there is the end of dictatorship at the end of the day. So after this, you see what is left, it's empty monuments. But there is vacuum. And in a moment from a totalitarian regime to market economy and democracy, you need institutions. You need a new political class. We didn't have politicians really trained and prepared for that. So then a vacuum was created. So in this vacuum, people could not wait. Priorities of the country were big, and of course, people had to survive to deal with the daily problems. 1 million people already left Albania in 90s in emigration, either legally or illegally, formally. These are the dramatic happenings in early 90s when people took the ships and went practically to Italy. It's something that Italians did centuries ago by going to America. It's quite interesting, but that's why a famous Italian director produced a movie about this story. It's called L'America, because this was what Italians were saying at the time. This was L'America for Albanians. So in the moment when this 1 million people left and 3 million are left in the country, there is another movement, because 1/3 of population is living in urban areas and 2/3, mainly rural areas, remote in mountain, displaced by government, by authorities. So what you see is that people from these remote areas, that is like 70% of the territory, try to go in the western side, which is flat, more near to the sea, more near to the capital region especially. And in the 4-5 years of political change, this is a study that shows the influx of people moving from remote areas to other bigger cities or to the capital city. And you see that most of the problems remains in the northern eastern part of the country, which was the poorest in the country at that time. The indicators, social economic indicators, were 10 times lower than the average of the country. So you can see that there was a problem. 10 years later, Albanian government decided to do the census. The finding was that the population was almost totally displaced in this triangle, which was, I explained, from Shkodra, Tirana, Elbasani, then to Vlora. These are the names of the cities. It shows the distribution of population, and then density of population also is practically located here. So it's a kind of big metropolis that is totally displaced in the West. Why? Because facilities are better, services are better, potential for future are better, and it's normal that people look now for a better life. What we did, a group of people, was to monitor this process in the first years of change. This is a map that CoPlan, in cooperation with USAID, prepared in early 90s. It shows how the city started to grow. The dark side settlements showed the informal settlement. It is quite interesting that authorities were not recognizing them. They said, no, where is this? We don't see them. If there is any informal construction, we will just demolish. We send police, army, it's solved. But practically this was impossible. 10 years after we monitored, the city grew further. Same CoPlan did this monitoring. And you see that the surface of the city, this is in the city that we inherited from communism, and this is the expansion, mainly informal. So the surface of the city doubled, population tripled, just in 10 years. This was not possible to be sustained by the means that authorities had, the institution had. So the gap, the vacuum, is clearly increasing every day. I remember very well this. 3 years after change, I had to travel in North Albania, and suddenly I see this picture. I just started working at university as a young assistant, and all the colleagues there, professors, well experienced, were not, they didn't know about this, because they were focused there in university, not getting the contact with the daily problems. And I was shocked. I was quite impressed. This was not typical for Albania up to that moment. And you see barracks, things that are built in one night, suddenly wood, plastic, or improvised materials. In fact, here it starts the third layer of foundation of our cities. It started with informality. The symbol became a neighborhood called Bathore, so Bathorization. It was the process of informalization of territory and expansion of the city, especially in periphery, but not only, also in the city center. So this is what CoPlan documented at the time, our institute. This is in 94. 6 years later, the neighborhood densifies. Now it's really transformed in the city. And you see that it's not happening only in Tirana, but it's happening also in Durrës, the main port city of the country, part of metropolitan area of capital city. Explosion in periphery with informal area, and at the same time, densification in the city centers. These are two processes that are happening in the biggest city of the country. A lot of expansion in periphery that is consuming land and especially environmental potential that the country had so far. This is another area of Tirana in periphery starting to develop, and you see the same area how it's transformed 10 years after. It's a big boom of construction. So we shift from a logic of a city that fulfills the basic needs, for the people that were somehow imprisoned in communism, coming now to the country they wish to live, to a city that goes to maximizing profits on individual basis. People try to grab opportunities. Initially was a basic need, later become a speculation of business. Even the projects in the municipality, the plans, the tentatives, always try to speak for densification of city center, verticalization, although the very important architects were involved, but not knowing very well the situation. This is the master plan that was done in 2003 by a municipality and the former mayor at the time that in fact brought a lot of change in the city. Now, recently he became the Prime Minister of Albania, not occasionally I believe. I'm going to show something in the presentation. This was done by Architecture Studio, Paris, master plan for the city center, because the mayor believes that the city cannot wait for the plans. The plans need time. Professionals were saying, need 3 to 5 years to do it. We need financing, we need this. So he said, no, I believe in programs. So we can start to intervene in different areas and produce something. But not always people were happy because the discussion was about transparency of the process. Is this a real process of transformation, positive transformation for the city, or is it about business and towers in the city center? That is a debate that's still going on, in fact, and I cannot tell the truth. But what is clear is, again, the vacuum of institution. You see here, this is the city center. It's much nicer. You see the public space, green, public buildings. Further you go into less public space and less planning, more informality. So less control, if I can call it presence, is better to say, from authorities. And of course, people run to the private initiative. They cannot wait for authorities. Everybody buys a private car in a country that a private car was a dream. Could be a second-hand Mercedes bought in Germany or Italy or whatever. But people are rushing the street, and streets are empty now, are filled with cars. And everybody is running to create a private shop, a private initiative. Everyone wants a house, and people have difficulty to understand why this is happening. Professionals worldwide known coming to Tirana, trying to help authorities to solve, they could not do anything. Why? Because this huge amount of problems accumulated, need for housing, need for freedom, now is translated in revenge for the past, trying to get what was forbidden and missed in the past. Without passing this wave, it is almost impossible to solve this problem. So what is the result? You see, especially in unplanned areas, a loss of public space and a lack of access. And you see, even in the case, Albania has a big potential of tourism. Even in this case, because of lack of planning, you see that everything is done on the back of public interest. So you see cars parking just in front of the place where tourists are supposed to stay. It's not everywhere like this. If someone wants to come in Albania, please come. It's an amazing country. I tell you later, but I'm showing the process. So this is the structure of the city, 10 years, 15 years after the change. You see organic areas or structures over time, and suddenly you see new buildings. It's like a urbicid, it's like a virus that is intervening, although there are plans in some cases, sometimes there are not plans. These are works done by architects which are supposed to do certain urban studies, but in fact, you see that solution is done on plot basis, on individual basis, not on unit. Just study it and see where is protect the public interest there. This is not possible. Even in the well-structured housing complexes that we inherited from the past, again, there are new constructions or interventions with high-rise building that somehow increasing density and destroying. Also in periphery, a new landscape is created. New shopping malls are coming after 90s, 2000. Asphalt is introduced for parking. But you see, even highways, there is this informality of signs. There is this chaos because the sign is more important than architecture. The message in the market economy becomes more important than the architecture. At the end, I can say that in this struggle to improve life, to create a new identity, we suddenly left this creation of this identity to the hands of people. And of course, it has positive parts in a society that was desperately moving from dictatorship, to freedom, and you need time to go to the balance. But in fact, as a result of this, we created also a kind of turbo culture, turbo capitalism, turbo architecture, and turbo urbanism, which is fueled by the money that is coming mainly from immigration. In the 90s, 50% of GDP was coming from remittances, from immigrants, and actually it is like 15%. So, as I said, it is more important design rather than architecture. You can do architecture without architects, without any rational logic, but you solve the problem and then you dream your own castle. You can be very aggressive to exploit your plot and maximize the profit without thinking what is going on here, because there should be someone to do this job. And of course, this is the Palace of Dream. A guy that suddenly comes from mountains, settled here, he built a basic house, and then he develops the business. I studied this process. This is in beginning of the 90s for cars that came from Germany to repair. Then later, it's like a motel. He developed this, but it was not successful. Then he built a restaurant here because tourism grew and a lot of people were traveling. And on top of it, that he did a house to make a clear statement that I own, this is my property. I got revenge for the past. I was not allowed. Now I have my business, my house, my everything. Of course, this is a good feeling. We can discuss about quality. We can discuss about the fact that it's not good planning and there is no, community feeling. But people are proud what they do. With or without architect, they're proud because it's their creation, it's their baby. And it's a big effort they put to create. It's an incremental growing society and you need time to invest. They put everything in this. It's like a dream. The dream that you had also in the past, creating America. This kind of atmosphere made also well-known architects crazy sometimes. You have Vinnie Mas, VRD, that was impressed from the project of facades beautification in Tirana and proposed this, but of course people rejected it. It was never implemented. But you have a story like this that make also you laugh. But behind this story, there is a sad story. The ships of immigrants going to Italy sinking, and then the parents put everything with their own family to make a memorial, which is not just a memorial, but also has some function on it. So that's why these things made us think. People are not stupid. People have a reason behind this. You should study the processes. You should see why they react in this way. Where is the failure of institution? Where is the failure of community? Where is the failure of people? And this was the driving force for us, Coplan, to start to go to the core of this problem to attack exactly informal settlements in Albania. Building a castle, petrol station that is a turbo architecture, and these kind of businesses, small businesses that produce these building materials, even the global networks of building materials are supporting this kind of turbo culture, unfortunately. So the result is that now the things are changed. But the problem is also the mentality of architects in itself. A traditional architect that is trained during communism, or the school that still radiates this mentality there, would do this building, would do a lot of balconies. We call the syndrome of balconies, for example, even that they are never used. Of course, Tirana is almost a Mediterranean country, but then it took time to understand that you can develop also different architecture. You can think about the skin, you can think about function, you can think about other way of producing envelope. You can think in a more rational way for the things that are necessary for the people, for the users. We had so gradually presence of international architects which tried to use also this freedom that was in Albania and tried to use also the poor implementation of planning standards by producing this type of architecture. Okay, might be interesting. Huh? We call it elephant effect. Why? Because if you do one, it's nice. But if you do too many, you kill the public space, you crash it. At the end, there is nothing left. So between these two extreme cases that I took, this is done by totally informally by people, this is done with architects in traditional school, I don't find a difference, to be honest. So this is another reason why CoPlan was thinking, well, should be a third way. A third way to meet the needs of people, but to satisfy the professional code, the professional morale, the professional interest. At that time, there was the boom. Everybody was, if you are architect in Albania, was lucky time, do a lot of projects, just finish the school, and then you are able to go in the market. But now it's not anymore. People are more careful, and professionals also are more careful in implementing their projects and ideas. Part of this experience that I'm going to materialize now became a debate at Balkans and European scale. We were initiators, and we are part of this network called Balkanology, where we have representatives from different countries studying this process of turbo architecture and turbo urbanism, why it happened, what will be the future, what should we do as professionals. And we have also a lot of cooperation with architects and institutions from Austria, Netherlands, and Germany, and Italy also that are sharing interest with us in this debate. After this period of total freedom, you see the pendulum goes try to go to the center. This is a kind of another stage of foundation of our cities. A lot of reforms happened in the country. Stability was settled somehow. Decentralization was implemented. Planning was reformed, but still the legacy of this system was still in doubt or discussion. Nevertheless, also the global crisis started to influence the real estate sector. So at the end of the day, people start to think, to breathe a little bit and say that now it's time to reflect on what happened after this party. What should we do to improve at least the situation? Would have been better to do it before, but we were not able to do it as a society. So I don't want to lose time. So we have the Superman hero, architect, professionist. What does it mean for us? Then during communism, architects and planners tried to be politically neutral, to behave, which we are just technicians. Politicians liked it at that time because they didn't want its reaction. But in fact, they were used as a manipulator of development. And then in the market economy now, gradually architect and planner see themselves as part of a political debate, part advisor of politicians, trying to be part of this decision-making that could influence society. All in this story that I try to show, I want to say that we have a very positive approach. We don't think, many people think, oh, this is horrible, terrible, and sometimes it's really like this. But we try to find poetry in this story, and we try to see it in a positive way and learn from this creativity of people. And we believe that by using this positive approach, we can get out of the situation. But in order to do that, you need to get out of the existing dogmatic system of education of architecture and planning. So that's why we started the CoPlan, and then later decided to shift in creation, establishing an alternative education system. So what is the first experience? This is Edi Rama, the mayor of Tirana. In 1998, he became Minister of Culture. He was almost like a hippie, very controversial, but really aggressive in terms of criticizing politicians for the bad performance, very present in the political debate and social debate in the country. In 2000, he became mayor of the city. In a time that everybody was thinking, this is a lost battle, we lost the city, so nothing could be done. So his message was, let's change the city. Let's start the change, let's keep the hope, especially of young people. Let's not let them emigrate, but let them try to work with them to stay in the city, in the country. But then in the moment he came in office, he noticed that there were almost no money in the budget. So between the promise and the willingness he had to do was a big gap again, a vacuum. And different from many other politicians, Edi Rama, which was not a typical politician, decided to do something totally different. So he decided, he was painter, in fact, he was artist. So he decided to paint the facades of the city. They were very gray, inherited from communism. He said, let's start with this process and then put some signals in the city, provoke society, which is already sleeping, you know, without hope. So let's start a process of wakening up and redevelopment of the city in general. I'm just illustrating. It created totally, immediately, a different atmosphere. This is a complex of ministries that became a political debate. These are housing inherited, blocks inherited during communism. This is almost like a spider building, you know. Famous international artists started to come to Tirana because he organized also the International Biennale of Contemporary Arts. So through them, he started to promote Tirana, to give a new image. And you know very well what does it mean to have a bad image as a city. You need to change it. And suddenly Tirana becomes attraction. Attraction, everybody starts to speak about this mayor that is quite controversial but very interesting. So this is one of the well-known now Swedish artists that work of Swedish artists that did with the facades. And there are many like this. Every year there are new introduced. But there is a lot of criticism also about this. Why painting only the facades in the public, in the main roads? Is this a kind of fake process? Well, you can say yes, but Edi Rama had the answer. He said that, look, I have to start somewhere to wake up people. I do the facade that is in the public side, which is have public interest, and I let people to learn this process and to continue here. In some cases, people took initiative, some cases not, but at the end of the day, we won the battle with the city in terms of community. Community became positive and active and part of this process. I just illustrate this process with few images while I drink some water. It is well-known experiment. If you go to Museum of Architecture in Rotterdam, in Vienna, MoMA also, they consider it one of the most interesting experiments in the cities around the world, where art became a kind of driving force to transform the city. You can say a lot about this, and I have also a lot of reserves. Practically, city was divided 50-50 almost about this, because also politics came in this story. What is this guy doing? Why is doing that? He's causing trouble to us, so he's changing the normal way of doing politics. But he continued. Many public spaces were brought back. Also, informal construction in city center for business purposes, small scale, were destroyed or cleared and replaced to open up spaces for public space, green, and parks. Okay, I want to continue because we should not lose time. So that is the plan that I told you, and I'm not losing time again. So he's tried to use now the processes of international, the presence of international planners of architects in competitions that were open to these guys to come to Tirana and to give ideas about the city. This is Vinny Mas, again, that produced this project that was really a big debate in the city. This is too far, this is too much, this is not serious. But there was a logic behind. There was this idea of reinterpreting the chaos around and trying to bring order. That was the idea also of Edi Rama. But how to do, is this the way or not? This is a kind of discussion. And out of these processes, several new objects came in the city, including some of the towers that I showed in the master plan, like this one. This is a studio of young architects from Belgium that came in Tirana, won this competition. And I read 2 weeks ago that MoMA considered this one of the 10 most beautiful towers built in the last decade. I have reserves about this, and the city have a lot of reserves. But if you come in the roads in Tirana and see the building in itself from different perspective, you'll notice some quite remarkable and different interesting elements of the facades. You have Mario Campi that coming here and proposing the competition for the new parliament. This was the headquarters of the Communist Party, and his message is that after the transformation, it became the headquarters for the parliament. And they wanted to create a new building for parliament or extend the existing building. So he came with the logic that this is the extension part, democracy prevails over dictatorship, and that's why it should be heavy and on top of this. Again, there was a lot of discussion. The project was not implemented. At the end, there was a proposal for a new site. This is the Mausoleum of Dictator that was done by his son-in-law and his daughter designed. They were architects. It didn't function like this too much, but it's a pyramid designed and implemented in the 80s. But during the 90s, it was used as an international center for culture. Suddenly, it ended up not maintained. It had a lot of political connotation. It was left without function. Politicians decided to destroy. People reacted, and professionists. Again, city was divided 50-50. A lot of politics behind this discussion. Then a process of competition, Copy Met Blau comes and won this project for the new parliament, which almost started to be implemented, but then political changes happened and it is frozen. We don't know what will happen yet. Coplan, this was somehow a part of the experience of Edi Rama. There's a lot to say about this guy, but I didn't want to go further. I focused a little bit in our approach. This was quite different. We met with Edi Rama halfway, in fact. We started at low scale to grassroots level to community, and this started from top up from politics. So our approach as philosophy as this non-governmental professional institute evolved over time, but clearly was based on the importance of the presence of community in participatory process of planning. This is very important in a society where institutions are not working. You have to build trust in community. You have to build trust on people in order to make plans happening. Otherwise, there will be no plans because people hate the word plan because of the communism. We monitored the informal settlement in periphery of Tirana. This was the neighborhood that I mentioned before, Bathore neighborhood. And this is the reference, it's the same reference over time. This is at the beginning of 90s. Was agricultural land transforming suddenly with houses, some roads. And you see over time, in 10 years, more and more people coming. We monitored also the process, how people come and what they do. They come from somewhere in a remote area. The first thing they do, they go to government. Municipality, ministry, they were going at the time, not now. They were saying that we need a house. Now we can go and live wherever we like. And they were saying, we don't have it. Go to the private sector. The private sector was created recently. It was in the first phase and was very expensive also because huge demand and no supply. So then people were looking for other options. They were hearing the rumors and they went usually in periphery or in land that was not clear in terms of property because of the vacuum that I explained. A restitution process started. So they identify a plot. Usually they were the first settlers that were somehow speculating and subdividing it. You identify the plot, then you buy some stones and you put it in the center to show that I own this building. There is something happening here. But this is a test also for authorities. If I put the stones, will police come there? Will someone come from local authorities, planning office? Usually they didn't show up. So they go to the second stage, build a very cheap barak where they can put building materials gradually because they start to find a job in Tirana. And after sometimes, after 1 year or 2 years, when they see that there is no reaction or complaints about ownership or about planning aspects, they go to third stage. They call the relatives, friends, and they buy building materials. They put their labor to reduce the cost. So the cost of this could be like $50 at the time per meter square, while if you go to the market at the time was $400 per meter square. So this was the big difference between two markets. At the end of the day, after 10 years, they built a kind of collective house where you see 4 brothers sharing a house, sharing the efforts, and all financing they have, and developing this kind of solution. But then suddenly when they have this, they see that there is nothing around. There's no infrastructure. So this is the moment that we explore to create the first casus, the first case, to make people interested about planning and the process of planning. We went in this neighborhood. We talked with people a lot. There were a lot of suspicion, why you are here, which political party you support. and so on, because it's normal. We told them, give us 6 months, 1 year to show who you are. We are just professionists. We want to support. And behind this, there is just professionalism and idealism, nothing more. We could go in Tirana and just have our own studio, but we want to do something for the city and for you people. Huh? So they tested us. Initially, we work a lot with leaders of community. Identifying them, it's very important, because it's the door to enter to the neighborhood, to the community. After them, we develop a kind of concept, a sketch, which is publicly announced and door-to-door distributed to provoke people, to say, it's like the Edi Rama fire that put in the building, to say that, hey, a plan is happening, look what is happening with your property. Are you impacted or not? Come and comment if we can find a solution, but we need to find the solution which is acceptable for the whole community, and it's also producing positive results in total. And not only doing that and adjusting the plan, the sketch, but also trying to mark it in the field, because people have to give up from the land that they occupied. In some cases, they have to remove also the buildings, and the community had to take care about them. These are some of the first sketches that produce a basic concept. It's not the perfect planning, I know this, but the basic standards are supposed to be met. And you see that informal constructions are trying to be somehow integrated with more formal developments, and then that's why we cooperate with not only with community but also with local authorities. These are long, tiring community processes where, to a certain moment, we met a representative of a project of the World Bank that was struggling to reform planning system in Albania, but no one was understanding them. So suddenly they see a project like this happening, and they said, where have you been, guys? Okay, can we cooperate for this? Because we need some examples, and then through this we can build the cases to go at national scale. It started like this. Groups of 15 to 25 houses, we call them subdivision. We ask them what are the basic needs and how they think about the nuclei. And then you go in the bigger unit and bigger neighborhood meetings. Through this, you develop a vision about neighborhoods, and you see how this vision is matching with the city ideas, which is designed together also with local authorities. That is a map that shows that we are not only planning there, but we are trying to play the facilitator, the moderator, also with the development agencies, with religious institutions, with government projects, trying to coordinate, because they were pouring money in different aspects and not focused on producing something that is really in total something positive for community. So coordinating this also was very important. We started from pilot scale, in small scale, and you see that people, at that time very poor, start to give up from the land and from housing, and there is no police needed there, like in case of city center, where Edi Rama had to put a police and army to demolish the buildings, but it's done with people themselves that they are convinced. We understood that doing this process, you need to work also with vulnerable groups that are very important factors in this process, with kids, with young people, and also to work with women. For example, if you ask a man what is the priority in this development of the neighborhood, they will say maybe a road. But if you ask a woman, they will say water for sure. So these were the basic needs that we had to work with different social groups, building some basic, very basic infrastructure. We were letting people to build them. As they wish. We were sacrificing a little bit the quality initially, but trying to get them in this process with a positive attitude. A lot of, here it was the moment that we learned a lot cooperating also with social workers. These processes have to be related to the anthropology of the processes that is happening in the neighborhood. You need to know what is going underground, and for that we enter door to door doing surveys. Social economic surveys, trying to understand the problem, economic level, how much they can pay for the infrastructure that is coming, etc. Cost sharing principles. A lot of debate also at city scale. You see the mayor coming, discussing here, presenting for the first time the logic of open forums, we call it, where every year, several times every year, we were meeting in one of the main hotels of the city and trying to share, to debate an issue about city planning, city development, different issues that are of public interest, and often media was invited to also broadcast them to reach people, to reach communities. A lot of publication and campaign. At the end of this process, it took us 10 years, but at the end of this, we came to a point that understood also that we could not deal forever with this. We had to produce models where people are active in process of participate in the process of planning and also implementation of these plans, but gradually transfer this to authorities, trained authorities to do this process and let them to do, because we could not replace government. We are their facilitators, we are professionals. So in this picture I show the chairman, the mayor of Tirana at the time and chairwoman of the district or region of Tirana signing partnership agreement with community representatives. After we did the plan, after we did the first interventions, we invited them to sign an agreement for improving 5 basic services on basis of this plan on cost-sharing principles, and also asking government, which was backed by World Bank, to work with these communities to create the first example of integration, fight segregation, and try to fight also poverty and integrate these people with the rest of community. Because of this, we got the president of World Bank at the time. In 1999 was the conflict in Kosovo, and then he came to visit Albania and Macedonia that were part of this, somehow, of this conflict indirectly because of the refugee crisis. And the Prime Minister of Albania, a very young guy, was inviting him to show a project financed by the bank with computers, and James Wolfenson of the time said, no, I want you to see something else. So for the first time, a politician of Albania comes in informal settlements, accepting existence of these informal settlements and making a promise that to people that we will do something about you. That was a starting process that was finalized with a lot of reformation of legislation. This process is finalized also with a plan at city scale, as I said, working with authorities in order to coordinate this intervention. This is the Bathor area and the central area of the neighborhood that I showed you. We recommended them to densify here, provide services and densify population here, orient them to come here. In this area, don't provide services, but get the situation in hand and push people to come here. Here, protect this area because there was airport, and don't let further constructions and should be maintained, and was also agriculture, for agricultural purposes. In cooperation with World Bank and the Urban Institute that was implemented, CoPlan at the time makes sure that this plan of the northern part, mainly informal part of the city, was integrated to the Greater Area Tirana plan that was provided at the beginning of 2000. Later, with municipality of Tirana and Edirama, we try to assist in developing a concept for the city of Tirana, trying to introduce the concept of decentralization of the city, because it was too central, ring radial system, the ring, and a lot of radials that were developed during the King Zog and Italian occupation that I mentioned, to start to decentralize the city with new centers in order to provide more services to new communities and put a balance in terms of quality of life and services for the people. In addition to that, we developed also a concept for the region together with Urban Plan Studio from Zurich, which we have been working also in other projects in the region. Again, here the concept was focusing, not let the informal development grow around Tirana city, but create new alternatives, focal points with services, promote the change of railway system that is very primitive, and try to introduce also near the airport new areas for development where people could be directed in order to let them to spontaneous development. So it started all this process from this road. I just show the process. At the end of the day, it's quite meaningful that one day the people, community there, municipal council decided to put the name of CoPlan on the road. And I say this, it's very important when you are become useful for the community. The point is that in this chaotic situation where everyone is building its own building without architects, there is no space for architect left. You need to create a space for yourself. And you need to create a respect from community. And that is very important in this process. The same was done in Durrës, as I said, and in 10 other cities of Albania participated in the process of planning. Also, we have been present also in Tetovo in Macedonia and several cities in Kosovo. But in this case of Durrës, there have been 3, the historical town somehow, the informal city that grew in a almost wetland area, in the past it was dry, and the coastal developments that are a boom of real estate because of tourism. So this is Durrës. It's like Rimini in terms of intensive tourist presence, low budget, and you go there and you have this huge coast and explore these opportunities. This was Caneta informal settlement. We intervene in a plot, starting from using the digital system for registration of all properties and making sure that this is the starting point for a formalization process all over the country. And it started like this. Identifying in the neighborhoods the focal points for social interventions, could be a community center, kindergarten, playground, things like this that could energize or make a kind of acupuncture to the existing structure that is totally chaotic. So gradually the spaces are changed, and finally governments, when they see the positive attitude of people, comes in the neighborhood to invest on trunk infrastructure. Now the development is totally in the hand of these people. So I make this long presentation of 90s because it's very important to understand this process. And in case of Albania, we are not in a situation where usually, in the case of Marxist capitalism, where you have, the bourgeoisie and proletarians, and then because of exploitation it's created this extra profit, which is the wealth of society and driving force. No, we are in Eastern Europe usually, especially in cases like Albania, the issue is not about this. It's about a different vertical division, not horizontal. It's having access to services and governance or being excluded. And the fact is the majority are being excluded. The point is, how can we provide people services? How can we build trust to institutions? How can we build trust to political class? And how can we build trust to institutions that can generate somehow, with the consent of society, the rule of law? And this is a process that cannot come in a day. It needs a lot of reform. We have been working gradually shifting from local community level to the local authorities, and then now we are providing a lot of assistance to central government. The first conclusion is this. Usually the traditional planning system is like you plan, you build infrastructure, you build housing, then you invite people. In practice, what happens is upside down system. You occupy the land, you build a house, build infrastructure, and then you think about planning. So you need to bring back, to reverse the situation, being smart by being one step ahead to the tendency. A second conclusion was that if we allow this system to continue like this, and I refer to Hernando de Soto from Institute for Liberty and Democracy, with whom we also worked for some time in Albania, you have the so-called formal city with planners and architects, and the informal city. If it continues like this, you create two different societies, which are not cooperating with it, not communicating with each other. And sorry, but this is the first sign of segregation and big troubles that come with segregation. So it's very important to remove this jar bell, this crystal, that try to make them communicate. A third conclusion was that you see the list of plans that were produced about Tirana and Tirana region. Many initiatives financed by internationals and locals also. You see only the plan that was done by participatory processes through CoPlan in the northern part of Tirana was passing all the procedures, all the legal approvals, and is in the process of implementation. If you go now in Kamsa, it's not perfect, but it's totally different. Totally different. So then there is the plan of Tirana, which had some support, but not totally, which is pending now. It's improved, but it's still pending for some political reasons. So the failure is that the planning system failed because it did not represent the interest of society. And it was not only that politicians didn't understand initially the planning, the importance of planning, but they didn't want to hear also about planning because they wanted to be free, to perform in their job. And sorry, but planning is a system that brings you to institution. That was another role that we somehow played as CoPlan, to sensibilize community for the importance of planning, not as an instrument that limits society, not as an instrument that blocks you, frozen you, but as an instrument that can be in total better than not having it at all. This is a reference of Hernando de Soto and the Institute for Liberty and Democracy. I don't know if you know Hernando de Soto. There's a lot of discussion about him. He proposed a process of reform to pass from informal economy to the formal one with 5 steps. What we did with Coplan in the 90s is somehow dealing with this part, and we dealt with this. We gave a big contribution in building awareness, pilot cases, making the diagnosis of the existing situation of territorial developments in the country. Now we are in the phase of designing a reform and implementing at the same time. But if we want that people are not left prejudiced at the end of this process of formalization, we should not have a situation where they get papers, but they don't have services. Or they have papers, they go to bank, but they don't get credits because they're prejudiced. So you see that fight against this segregation and prejudice is much bigger than making a sketch in a plan, nice sketch in the plan. But it's very important also to enter in process where politics is involved, where economy is involved, where social dimension is present strongly. So you need to think in different layers and different dimensions. This is part of survey that we did on basis of this reform, a survey that was done countrywide in different parts of the cities or rural areas or booming areas. We were going and selecting some model areas, and we were interviewing door to door. We were trying to identify forms of informality, how they are expressed. There are different degree of informality. For example, you see here, this is a legal business, but they register 10 people and they have maybe 50 people working there. Or you have here Bilardo, which is registered, but underground you see a boutique, which is almost hidden. You don't see it. So you have to go inside and to discover this. And the process of subdivision in informal settlements that happened, and the government doesn't know what is going on. Also in documentation, notarization. Quite interesting. We identified 11 identification documents in the country at the time, 11. If you want to rule a country, if you want to establish rule of law, you need to have clarity. How many people are there? How many properties? You have to have a property registration system that was not in place. So we started with identification documents. I'm proud to say that we convinced government that we should remove this and have only 3 documents. The international biometric passports, which is part of the Albanian integration in EU now. I have a passport like this, not with me now, but then the driving license, which is again biometric. It's a card, like you have it here, and also the ID card for civil status, These 3 documents have a chip, they're interrelated, so now there is some order. We know how many people are, and we have started the process of property registration, so we can also think about taxes, we can think about providing services, and we can provide also better planning also in the same time. I don't explain this, it's interesting, but what we did also was in a participatory way. This is a graph, for example, that shows that we went in the queues. This is the property restitution office. And the law, for example, says that if you go to this office in 1 month, you apply in 1 month, you get an answer and you solve the problem. And you pay, I don't know, $100. In practice, it's not like this. We went there, it took 8 years for them in the process, in the queue, and a lot of corruption, a lot of unclarity. They had to pay much more money underground, and we calculated this. This is part of the informal economy. At the end, we draw a conclusion. The finding was shocking, and I'll show 2 slides. The first, we calculated the informality not only in terms of real estate, but also in economy. 80% of the properties in real estate had some extra legal features. I will explain this, what it is. And 90% in business. So we calculated that the total dead capital or informal economy, not really active in the market economy, was like almost $13 billion US. So you see, it's 4 times more than the official aid given to Albania during transition. 9 times more than foreign direct investment. It's 9 times more than total reserve. And we projected the speed of this reform. Albania is really lagging behind if we want to be integrated in the EU. So that's why we said we need really serious and radical reforms to improve this institution, to avoid vacuum, to try to bridge people with governance, with authorities. This was shocking for politicians initially. Initially, they denied the findings, but then now there is more interest, more and more every day. Another finding was the typology of informality. We identified 4 main columns where the economy is staying. The first one is illegal economy. Illegal economy, oh, these are the bad guys. Prostitution, drugs, traffickers, this kind of people with whom you don't have to do. You fight them, you try to at least minimize at any cost, because these are people that cause trouble, organized crime. And we put also some, it was like 10 to 15% at the time in 2007 of the economy. And Albania, I said, after that did a lot of progress in arresting more than 60 criminal groups exactly to fight this process. That was monitored by EU and the international organization. Informal economy, 30 to 35, these are the guys in the formal settlements in Boulevard that I mentioned you. These are not bad guys, but they don't have alternative. They don't have legal alternative and affordable alternative. So they fell in the trap of informality by building something to solve their own problem. 35% of the economy, and this is like people that we should not make war with them. We should try to get them on board. We should incorporate them. We should, by entering this process of formalization, neighborhood improvement, infrastructure development, cost-sharing principles, what I showed with CoPlan, and which is possible, and now it's in the process of replication by legislation in national scale. Extra legal economy. In Albania, even people like me and you fell in this category. These are not, again, these are not bad guys. This is something like you have a property, for example, because of human mistake or corruption or something happening, your property is 100 meters, it's registered 50 or 90, I don't know, meter square. So there is a mistake that makes that you do not contribute to the society fairly, the total amount. And you don't register the real value of your property. Could be also in other aspects of economy. I mentioned real estate. Again, this is a question of inefficiency and bureaucracy of the state. Reforms in these aspects, improvement, fight against corruption can also solve this problem in order to integrate these guys to contribute really fairly to the economy. And then this is 20 to 25%. These are the most serious guys. These are the good guys, good example. They have been keeping the most of the burden of the reforms in shoulders. We need these guys to get together and push this away. That's the logic of this reform. We can make a community that is more aware about the importance of institutions. In this story, I saw myself 2 years, because I was invited by Albanian Prime Minister exactly to draft with other experts this reform. I quit it from CoPlan for 2 years. I worked in this governmental office, and at the end of the day, I finished my job and I left after this report that was shocking for politics, but was true, to my opinion. Then we discussed with my colleagues of CoPlan and said, what can we do in this situation? And the conclusion was that we need to do something to create a critical mass of people that believe in change of Albania, believe in positive process of participation, believe in good planning, where the interests of people are put in balance with community and society in general. So then normally education was very important. That's why, again, with this positive attitude, we decided to establish Polish University as an institution that is providing alternative education in architecture, planning, environmental issues, and applied art design, and including also civil engineering. We are working now with different institutions, including some colleagues here, like James, and a few students also came, as I know, to Albania also to join our institution. Not losing time, I conclude by showing some experiences of our work also in architecture. So the first project is the building of Polish University. We started, small school, started in the city center, but then we said, after having a positioning about city, after trying to understand the processes that are happening in the city, we want somehow now to make a kind of distance and reflect and also attack the city with a more scientific and more professional way. So then we decided to move a little bit in the periphery, in the highway to airport. This is the heart of economy of Albania now. A lot of services are focused now here. And city center is here. Here is where police stays. What we see in the way is this chaotic situation, informality, as I explained, a lot of signs, a lot of symbols, and there is lack of order. So what we find after a lot of search, we find this industrial building. Then we said this is brilliant because it had only columns and beams, and we said we have space, we can use it, we can organize it as you want. We had the inspiration, sorry for lack of modesty, but Bauhaus was our inspiration. Why? Because of the contribution that Bauhaus gave in certain moment in society. And we are not saying that we are giving this contribution, but we want to be positive to give such a contribution. So without complex, we decided to learn from this experience, and not occasionally Bauhaus is present also in our school with contacts and projects exchange. So the building had some organization. It is located not 90, let's say, degree with the highway. It has a kind of movement, but this we thought is nice because it creates some angles. This was the existing part, only with columns and walls outside. Everything was empty, was clear space. We organized it. The challenge from structural point of view was that there were 3 buildings, in fact. This was the existing one, the first. There was an extension in process that was never finished. And then we added this one also. So from structural point of view, they had to be separated. But from the other side, they had to create a unity together in order to provide entrance. We thought that it's good also that people come from highway, with the cars, despite the public transport that is there. They enter underground in order to protect students from projects and models to be wet when it's raining, especially winter, and then get in the hall, and the main hall will be the space where we thought that it's like the meeting point, and we call it a space for thinking. In fact, it's the image also of the university. We had to work a lot in terms of bioclimatic aspects, because the cost, if we do real heating and cooling system, would be more than building itself. So we developed with our staff and students a team, and then they solved the problem. The corridors in itself were like tubes infrastructure. We created this difference of pressure and a kind of chimney here to get the air and to create a movement in the neighborhood. This is the main facade at the end of the result, the extension part of the building. We had to solve also from structural point of view this creation of this space by this structure that was not possible to solve in Albania. So we solved from calculation, but they invited a specialized company nearby in Italy to implement it. Then the rest was done by local people, monitored by our staff, civil engineers and architects. Was done with a lot of passion and in the participatory process. Getting parents, getting students, getting staff, talking about this, discussing how should be this new school, what is the image, etc. So that was more or less the finding. There is a second building behind. Maybe I should have a slide. This is the back side. We try to keep it simple. This is the second building, now is finished, which is in fact practically not used for the moment, but is reserved for the needs, future needs, mainly for the laboratories we want to develop. This is the main hall that was created because of the extension that I explained. We paved this with this special material that was like, I don't know how to say it in English, but it's similar to the material you have here, but allows you to introduce also colors and shapes and forms that you want, and it's unique. You do it once. Yes, maybe. No, we have another name, but anyway. So this is the space. There are different events. It's a meeting place, this space. It's very important. Big events are happening there. Different classes, auditoriums that were created given the structure that was existing. And of course, the space is always used. There are a lot of events. Actually, every year we have this biennale. 1 year is for Tirana Architecture Week, and 1 year is Tirana Design Week. And the starting base is university, but it's expanding all over the city. These are details of the building. This is the main facade in the entry. Okay, we did another project. We were invited actually by US government to participate in a competition in Afghanistan. We were surprised, in fact. We have a reputation in USAID projects, World Bank and other. We have been working with a lot of American institutions, American-based institutions, but they know about us in one way or another, so they said Albania is a good case where Muslim and Christians are living, so religion, it's a society that religion somehow has a solution. People have a balance, and they don't see it as a conflictual part, but they see it as a aspect that people can unite people. So we were selected among 6 other companies to participate in this National Museum in Afghanistan. We didn't win, I tell you from the starting point, but for us it was quite interesting experience getting staff, students in a team together with 3TE and studio in Ferrara University with whom we cooperate for implementing some programs. And in another project we get, for example, also the Make Lab also cooperating with us. Quite interesting, working also online, quite interesting experience of participation online. That is also interesting. So the point was this exercise was very difficult because you have to work in a society that is not stable. It's in terms of, it's in conflict, and the security measures were very strong. The point is how to create a space that is architecturally acceptable and nice and beautiful, representing somehow the values of society, but also defending the values, art values of Afghanistan that are in risk. Near this, the site is also the Royal Palace and some other important buildings, very interesting buildings, but unfortunately that are damaged because of the conflict for decades there. So our point was very difficult exercise. One of them had to go to see, in a very difficult situation, the site. We have to call then representatives of the some people from Muslim community that have been there also invited to this country for certain reasons to show us more also about the country. And then we met some people also. We could hook also with some people that were from Afghanistan to show more about history, about how they perceive this. It was very important to understand the relation of the city with the mountain and the silhouette. That was some comment that was given to us. And then translating the urban pattern to a kind of model that could be the basic start in terms of plan and volume for the total building in general. Interpreting also the colors of the context also and putting in the building. So that was more or less the final result. We had to incorporate also motifs from local culture, which were very rich, and trying to see that facades, most of them should have been protective from one side and limiting the amount of light entering in a gallery. Okay, I move it fast. That is the plan, that the existing building and the new building that we proposed. A lot of, it had to have also a certain archive. That was the final outcome. And the point was to make it a reference for the city, because around there are important buildings which are supposed to be also reconstructed and renovated. That is another story. This is the big Bjarke Eagles project in Tirana. He won the competition for the mosque. We tried to convince him, he's a good friend also in Polish, I've been there also lecturing, try to convince him that instead of having a mosque, we want a kind of facility that it contributes for a message, that it's not just a mosque, but it's also a museum of coexistence of the religions in Albania, which he took in consideration, and the importance of the public space. You noticed from my previous presentation that public space is very important for us, the public interest and public space. So then he took consideration, he did a quite interesting job. He won, then there were political change, the project stopped. Suddenly, this was some image of this square that was created. This is the result. It was changed in the, it was changed in the, please laugh because I brought it exactly for that. No, the point is, these are interferences in political aspects. Then the site was changed, and then a project that was imported, parachuted somewhere from a studio in periphery of Istanbul, produced this very traditional thing. Oh, I have to speak for hours for this, but I don't want to do it. But we see here a problem. Now, we were invited suddenly in Pristina, a new competition also there. And now, despite us and the studio in Ferrara in Italy, we invited also the Make Lab, and we decided to work together. There were people from Kosovo, so they were studying at the time, so we thought, let's create this Albanian Kosovar team together, and with international expertise also joining us and produce something that goes beyond this. This is some images of the work we did. I don't want to spend much time, we're late. You know this discussion, you have to think about orientation, about the Porsche, and about, you know, courtyard, the presence of water, the light. This was the logic, producing because of the light a kind of algorithm, a kind of logic that would help us to build a facade that where the most of light is needed, you have less, let's say, material present, and where you need dark, more material is present to produce a facade that is quite, for me, interesting. This was a result of the work of a team. And I have to acknowledge also the contribution of James and colleagues here. Okay, you can put whatever name you want. At the end, the winner. It's the same. And really, we were shocked, but also we were understanding to a certain moment. And that made us to open a debate also there, because it should be a third way. I have, in this moment, I reflected personally. Yeah? It should be a third way. You know, I'm not saying that we should produce this to win. No, never. But we should go to architecture maybe that is not what we are thinking that is the best. Again, it's about participation. Again, it's about considering Muslim community what they want, about their leaders, and producing something that satisfies their expectation, but also justified also our professional ethic and moral, you know, behind. So that is an exercise for us in Polis to think about. It's happening not only for the mosques, but it happened also. Another thing, we participated in Tirana, an international competition for the extension of the new boulevard. This was very exciting moment. This was a boulevard that would integrate the formal city with informal city, and we said that we know the situation, so we can contribute, why not, for connecting it. The site is this, that is underlined. This is the vision, ambition that we developed, inspired what the King Zog did 1 century before, you know, trying to have this kind of impact. In Tirana, the river is channelized. The river that we have there, it's polluted and it's not organized, but we thought, don't do the same mistake to put in channel, but try to think for a more sustainable solution, more landscape type of intervention. This is the plot of a railway area, you know, that is left empty, vacant land. And we developed the axis that goes from historical to historical castle, Petrela and Kruja, and passes through the main boulevard, trying to provide a different image for the city. Thinking also about a strategy, we call it blue and green strategy, considering the potentials of the region, because there is almost like an amphitheater with mountains and hill and the field in between, a lot of lakes. Considering these urban structure, and also the issues of public transport there. Transforming this area in not just in a new boulevard, but also in a public park, and introducing a concept of the streets not necessarily being very rigid, but adapted to the context, because if you go with the radical solutions, you'll demolish a lot of houses and create a lot of problems. So we created a program, like university area, national stadium complex, that is new zoo and the park of the city, purification parks in the river, you know, this activation of this industry that are collapsed after communism, and in the new creative industry for Tirana. Just passed through. Inspiration for the landscape work from the tradition of tapestry that we have there, interpreting this in the local conditions. especially dealing with the city, with the river, making this a very important element for revival of the city and integration rather than division. Here there was discussed about also, I forgot to say that this is in cooperation with the KCAP studio in Rotterdam. They are quite very active in also in many other countries, with office not only in Rotterdam but also in Shanghai, and also they are present, especially specialized in issues urban design and landscaping. We had a very good understanding of local situation, and they had this international experience, and we went together for this competition. It got recognition as innovative solution, and I'm glad to say that even that we were not the first at the end, this, let's say, solution somehow impacted also the final proposal for reserving the green space that was not considered in the winner, by the winner. Something that interesting that we do is every year we select different local governments which are poor in terms of financing. They cannot do plans of studies. So we try to create teams with students and staff and provide assistance to them. These are processes that continue 6 months, 1 year, or 2 years. This is the case of Zagori, which is a remote area but very nice with a big potential in South Albania, big potential for tourism. Students going in the field. The problem is that you see the indicators are the poorest, especially in this region that we are working. Creating a vision beyond the national border, looking to the relation with the northern Greece, because there is just nearby to the border to Greece. The same commune that is here, it's totally different from the one in Greece. They generate by tourism 30 million euro per year, and here is almost nothing. And why there is interest? Why? Because there is no services. So just passing through, developing a concept for improving the access, creation of 2 focal points for services instead of letting distribution of services everywhere, but creation of the focal points in order to increase the efficiency. And of course, some interventions in the main centers of each village in order to create attentions, because there are potentials. Creation also of a catalog that will help local people to implement, local authorities to implement it. The same experience is in Vora. I just want to show this, that these are the first plans in the country that usually planners or architects are used to see situations with densifications like in Tirana, while here we try to consider also landscape value. So you see a vision that is considering what is happening around the highway and what is happening to the ridge of the hills, which is very rich and can have a very nice panoramic view and become a potential for the people. Developing also access within this municipality that is half rural, half urbanized, and intervening with some of the key projects in the area. Also in Kosovo, in Peja, this was the site, a former military compound they wanted to develop. It was part of a European competition. Reading the porosity of the city, is very interesting city, Peja, with a lot of interesting buildings, historic building, and the bazaar. From the first sketches, developing this concept of porosity, and ending up with because the mountain and the green is very nearby, not consuming it, but also trying to develop with a sensitiveness about landscape and creation also of the square that is with the logic of the bazaar that is present also in the city. Okay, this is a recent project that we just started when I left to implement. This is like headquarters for the Democratic Party. It's a big political debate also going on about this. I don't want to enter on this, but this is the existing building. We were asked to make a concept out of 6 studios. We won it this time, and we are going to implement, and it's in the process. This is the site. It was the cultural center for military, but it's the culture of military. You don't see anything. Where is the building? That is the building. Has some element of modernism relatively during the time of communism in Albania. We thought that we should protect the building, we should maintain and clean it from the interventions over time, develop a concept that we have been experimenting in the past with Berlage Institute from Holland, of the city center, not letting the downtown, the city center, divided by walls or fences, but opening up and let people move, normally between buildings that have historical values. The same will happen with this building. And instead of having a party headquarters, it's like speaking for a Republican Party in US. We want to build a freedom of house where the square that is introduced here, it's a place where people also can meet and not necessarily going to the party, not losing the time. The idea is to develop this square and create other opportunities for the administration to enter from the other side, which connects with Parliament, extending the new building. This side, it's under radiation of the sun most of the year, so we have to think about the facade and trying to create umbrella with transparency, which will give the idea of the protection from the rain, from during winter, but at the same time it's transparent. You can see the sky. The sky is the limit. That's the logic behind. Tirana Architecture Week and Tirana Design Week are two important events. We are working with different people there to promote a new culture. We are devoted in a lot of experiments. This is like concluding. I know that I'm over time now. Every year in City Center we try to produce something. These are simple and used for exposing, for example, international competitions or local products that are done usually by students. This was with Mainz University. We had to deal with bunkers of communism, transform them in backpackers. We saw what people did and we tried to transform them. It was implemented, a lot of discussion, a lot of complaints from local people there because of the ownership, but at the end we did it. We did it. This is a performance from the local artist also about that. This is a plastic bottle bus stop, recycling plastic bottles. It was a campaign, and then trying to experiment with these forms. We monitor how the people react, community react to it, and how the climate factors also change the building. And it got an award from the American Embassy, Act Now, for the civil society. There is a lot of urban activism in the city. This is another case where we experiment with wood material to develop a kind of greenhouse, which could be a model to be distributed in schools of Tirana for promoting the culture of recycling plastic and growing green things that could be used by the school for many reasons. This is part of the process. And this is also another experiment with wood. I'm not going to lose time just to show it's like a dome. The reference was clear. This was lately placed at the center of Tirana during last days and caused a lot of provocation in the city because they invited also people to remove this several times to draw attention. There was quite a lot of action. And I'm concluding now with this laboratory that we do every year in Sicily. We call it Sicily Lab. I think this is something that we can also cooperate together because students come from different countries also that cooperate with our school. And this is done with a professor and a PhD coordinator of La Sapienza, Antonino Saggio, which is a writer of the collana of the books of architecture, history of architecture in the modernism and implication of IT in architecture. Very interesting experiment we do every year. And international partners also come join us together. I concluded this and I want just to show 30-second thing. Because I know you are tired now. Okay. This is the bunker, I think. We try to promote a lot of experiment, a lot of innovative ideas. Every year there are different projects chosen. And I find a lot of similarity in what you are doing here, because it's not only producing nice design, but touching things and producing the starting point for good architecture. Every year in September we have these events where we experiment. So please feel free when James comes with this parametric design course or during these days to come and join us, because we can learn from each other, but I'm sure more Albanian students from Polis and Kosovo will come also here in Lawrence Tech. That initiation of this cooperation so far has been very positive, and we'll like to push it further. Okay, and
Problem is, we don't know metrics.
this is the provocation with the dome. Students invite some people, they don't know what is going on. There is this urban furniture, can we push this because there is a problem, police will come to remove. In fact, there is agreement with the municipality to have it. But the idea is to make this participation, to make citizens proactive. And they have wheels, I bet. They have the wheels, but they use this. And it was quite exciting. After that, the mayor of Tirana came after it was completed, because there was some more work to inaugurate it. But it was a nice exercise to and they have to do it like a hidden camera, you know, because not to scare people. Okay, thank you. And sorry for the time.
Thanks, Besnik. I don't think we have time for questions, but anybody that wants to hang out and ask questions afterwards. But more importantly, if you want to come tomorrow night at 6, we'll all be there to take a look at the work in the gallery. Thanks for coming.